So in this recording, we are going to learn what are keys in the database. If you remember from the class, key is the column that you see when you describe a table like this. I'm gonna go to my database. You see what are the tables, A and T. I will use the database that we are using in the class, which is class 17. I'm gonna say show tables and then describe a table. I say describe students, I'll see the column number 4, which is a key. This is the column that contains the information if some field is the key field for that table, and by key I mean the field by which you can identify the row of the table uniquely. Now let's go back to this drawing. For students table, there are a lot of keys that can be super keys. First of all, I will introduce the terminologies and then we will see the example. So there are super keys, candidate keys, and primary keys. A super key is a set of fields or set of column names, the combination of which can uniquely identify a row in the table. Whereas a candidate key is the minimum set of columns that can uniquely identify the row of the table. And the primary key is the choice of database administrator of the correct candidate key for the table. So for students table, let's assume for the sake of simplicity, we have student number, SNO, the student name and date of birth, and assume that no students can have both name and date of birth same, so that we can conveniently have our super key 1 as student name plus date of birth plus gender, for example. So a student row can be uniquely identified by a student name, date of birth and gender, because no two students can have the same name and date of birth and gender. So these three fields, name, date of birth and gender, can uniquely identify a row of the student table. So the super key 1 is the combination of these three fields. Similarly, we can have another super key, which is student number, and this is a plus symbol. I'll just use some different color to highlight that it's plus. Student number plus student name. These two fields can also uniquely identify a row in this table. Out of these super keys, we are going to make candidate keys now. Super key 1 contains three fields: student name, date of birth, and gender. Out of this, gender field is not really necessary to uniquely identify a row. Only student name and date of birth are enough. So from student key 1, we create this CK1, which is candidate key 1, that contains the name and the date of birth. Similarly, from student number and student name, which is our super key 2, we can also create another candidate key, which is just student number, because only student number can uniquely identify the row in this table. So we have two candidate keys, which is like a minimal set of columns that can uniquely identify the row. From these, we as in database administrator can choose one primary key for this table, and we can choose student number because it is the smallest number of fields that you can have. Now conventionally, the column name or the field of the table that is a primary key is known as ID, and people mostly prefix it with the first letter of the table name. So students table may have a field called SID, with the short for student ID. You can also say student underscore ID, where ID is a short for identifier. because it uniquely identifies the row.